Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
Hello, everybody. This is Brett and Alice. And before we get to the show today, we want to tell you about one of our favorite new podcasts, Unjust and Unsolved, a new true crime podcast from our friend and friend of the show, investigative journalist Maggie Freeling of the Obsessed Network, where she tells the story of people who have been wrongly accused of crime.
Maggie began the project by sending letters to people in prison whose stories haunted her, and she heard back from nearly all of them. They all wanted their stories to be heard.
Each episode focuses on a single case. The stories are told through original interviews with a convicted person, their loved ones, and lawyers.
And Maggie reinvestigates the crimes, sharing all the evidence pointing away from the convicted person, and in some instances, presenting the case for other suspects.
Unjust and Unsolved is a compelling mix of investigative journalism and true crime storytelling.
Find Unjust and Unsolved and all Obsessed Network podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. We know we'll be listening.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we seek our horror across the sea. When 6 people were brutally murdered with an axe, the name of the place it happened became a watchword for terror. Exactly what went down at Hinterkaifeck. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, with my haunting co-host, Alice.
How thematic, Brett. Happy almost Halloween.
You know, I've thought about that one for a while, I want you to know. I was really wanted to make sure that I got it right. But yes, happy almost Halloween to you too, Alice. I've enjoyed this little detour down horror mysteries.
I know, and today we literally have an axe murderer.
I know. It's awesome. I mean, terrible, obviously, but awesome nonetheless. I think this is our first axe murder, right?
This is our first, and I don't know that there are that many axe murders to cover, which is probably good. It's a really
you'd be surprised.
That's fair. That's fair. But you know, kind of loses its appeal after a while, I feel.
Yeah, there's the axe murderer of New Orleans, who's credited with making jazz. Well, maybe not making jazz be such a big deal in New Orleans, but making the play of it in public such a big deal. Because supposedly he said that if he didn't hear jazz music coming from every street in New Orleans, he was going to murder more people. And so they played jazz music all night. And that was the end of his killing spree.
Are you being serious? Is that really?
I am being serious. The Axeman in New Orleans. Yeah.
That's some real commitment to the craft of jazz.
Yeah. You know, sometimes you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right?
Oh, gosh. That's amazing. Hey, it's really good to hear your voice again because we've actually taken kind of a break from recording, but we were so ahead that our listeners have not had to suffer because great news. I hear the hole in your house is finally fixed.
The hole in the house is fixed. I'm no longer in the hotel. I have moved back into the house. Now, I have not unpacked everything, so we're still in the process of doing that, but I made sure that I unpacked the podcasting equipment so we could get back to work. We didn't want to miss any weeks. Didn't want to leave you guys hanging or anything. So, our commitment to the podcast is solid. It's solid.
And it also shows how, I think, type A we are, that we recorded so far in advance because we didn't want to miss a single week, where I'm not sure that many people would have necessarily missed the fact that we missed a week, but we cared.
Exactly. So we were far enough ahead. We got to get back ahead because I'm always afraid we're going to have a trial and have to miss recording. But, that's been the one good thing about the COVID. It's kept that down.
That's true.
Yeah, but hopefully we're moving out of that. I don't know. Keep your fingers crossed. I guess we'll see where we are.
Who knows?
In a couple weeks, but
schools are open.
Who knows?
And we'll see if it sends us all running back to our closets.
Yeah, it may. And if it does, just make sure to protect yourself from potential axe murderers, because they are out there, and we are going to talk about one today. We're going to talk about one, like we said, we're going international today. This is an international crime. This is one that's going to take us all the way to Germany, Bavaria, to be exact, and all the way back to 1922. So this is an oldie but a goodie. This is a famous crime. I think most of you have probably heard of it. But hopefully we can sort of bring a new spin to it and maybe uncover the true culprit behind this really terrifying crime if you think about the facts of what went down at Hinterkaifeck. Now, Hinterkaifeck means beyond Kaifek. So basically, this is a place that was sort of in between two towns. It was a little farming community and the sort of rural place where you don't expect crazy things to happen like axe murders. But by April 4th, 1922, the people of that small farming community around Wagen, Germany, were beginning to become concerned about their friends and neighbors, the Gruber family, who lived at a little farmstead called Hinterkaifeck. No one had seen the members of the family for some days, and they had not attended church that Sunday, as had been their custom. To make matters worse, the oldest child, Kazilia, had missed several days of school, which was unlike her. Now, what they could not know at that time was that all 6 members of the Hinterkaifeck homestead, husband and wife, daughter and her 2 children, and the new maid, were dead, their heads smashed in with a mattock. Now, Alice, I don't know if you know what a mattock is, or if you've ever seen a mattock before. Are you familiar with mattocks? Have you used a lot of those in your time?
In my practice of the law, I have not had a chance to use a mattock yet. So can you tell me what a mattock is?
We'll put a picture of one on the website for you. Actually, a picture that I found that's supposed to be a recreation of the actual mattock that was used. Essentially, we call it an axe murder, and it is an axe murder. A mattock is sort of a type of axe, and you'll see different variations on what a mattock is. Some of them, it's like an axe head on the front and then a pike on the back. The one we're talking about here essentially is like an axe / hoe on the front, and then sort of a flat metal back part of it. Does that make sense? So like the front of it is the tool and it's attached to the piece of wood, and then the metal on the other side is just sort of flat. So there's no tool on the back.
So now that you're describing it, this is almost like in those picture books for my toddler, this is like the quintessential kind of axe hoe that is pictured. So this makes sense because it's 1920s. But yes, I've definitely seen something like that. What's like the non-murder use of a mattock?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I mean, I'm not much of a farmer myself. I know this comes as a surprise to everybody. Never farmed any worms or anything else.
Because it doesn't look like it's the type of axe you use for, say, cutting down a tree. It looks
I don't think it is.
More for maybe farming, like for hacking into, say, the dirt, is my guess.
I think that's more what it is. I think that's more what you use it for. If anybody out there is, an expert mattocker, let us know exactly what you're using a mattock for. I feel like we bring a lot of expertise to this podcast that maybe you don't hear other places, but things like farming, just not us. This is, a couple weeks ago we did the worm farm. We didn't know anything about that. We don't really know anything about mattocks. Somebody on Twitter told me, by the way, that what you're really farming the worms for is like their poop. I don't know if that's true.
But I didn't, and that was fascinating to me, but this is a tangent. But why do you need their poop? I understand the use for worms, but I don't understand the use for their poop.
I don't know if it's like a really good fertilizer or something. Maybe like worm poop is the best fertilizer.
Really
I don't know.
It's like the caviar of fertilizer.
Yeah. There you go. The caviar of poop. And if you're wondering what we're talking about and why we're talking about this and you haven't heard the Lois Reese episode, you should go back a few episodes and listen to that one as well. But in any event, the mattock. So if you're going to axe murder somebody, I'll just give you guys some advice on how you axe murder somebody. You really want an axe like this, because if you take an axe and you go at somebody's head and you swing the axe at their head, the axe blade is going to get stuck in their skull, right? Or their chest, or wherever it is that you're going to try and axe this person, because axes are not really made for killing people. So they don't have like a blood groove or anything like that. It's hard to get them out. So you really only get one swing if you use the axe side. So if you want to kill somebody, the way to do it is with the other side, because what you do is you use that hard metal side to essentially bash their skull in. Right? And all it takes is one good swing and they're dead. And you bash their skull in, your axe is not stuck in their head, and then you can just go on and you can kill the next person with your axe. So that's probably what happened here. And the mattock is sort of perfectly designed, really, for killing someone.
Brett, you just so cold-heartedly explained how to kill someone with a mattock as if, like, it was no big deal.
Well,
I just have to point out, that was super, that was you've really thought about this.
Hey, you never know who might be listening to this podcast and might need some advice. So I just want to make sure that we're providing educational opportunities for everybody who's listening.
I think I was just putting words to what everyone was thinking, which is like, man, could he have described that more coolly, as if you were going down your, grocery list?
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that's how you do it. I'm sorry.
Well, please keep going, because now you've really gripped my attention.
Okay, fine. Don't do that. What I just said, don't do that. That's your disclaimer for this episode. Do not murder someone with an axe, either end of the axe. Returning to the story, the farm that we're talking about was owned jointly between Andreas Gruber and his wife, Kazilia. They had a daughter, Victoria, and the Grubers were not exactly a well-respected family in the area, and for good reason. It seems that from a young age, Andreas had sexually abused Victoria and had begun having sex with her at the age of around 16. And this was something that essentially continued for the rest of her life. In 1914, Victoria married a Carl Gabriel, young man from a local family. Most people think that this was an attempt to get away from her abusive father, but Andreas insisted that the newlyweds continue to live on the farm with him. Now, while Carl was on the farm, it's pretty clear that Andreas was jealous of the young man, and he treated him very badly, abused him. But Carl, he knows. I just gotta stick this out, because once Andreas is dead, the farm's gonna come to me and Victoria and our child that we have together, who is named Kazilia as well, after her grandmother. But apparently, things were so bad on the farm that when the First World War began, Carl jumped at the chance to get away, and he joined the German military, and unfortunately, he was killed in the trench warfare that followed. In the wake of his death, Andreas was named guardian to Kazilia, and there were a lot of rumors in the town that was fine because he was really her father.
So, with Carl out of the way, Andreas and Victoria continue to have sex. To be honest, I don't think they ever really stopped. And at some point, they are caught by the maid and charged with incest. And as a result of that being caught, Andreas is sentenced to a year in prison, while Victoria is kept in custody for a month. When Victoria returns to the farm, she gets into a relationship with Lorenz Schlittenbauer.
Who's our next door neighbor, by the way.
Oh, next door neighbor. Okay. Makes sense. You know, it's a farming community, and Lorenz is, I think the back of his farm backs up to Hinterkaifeck.
Right. I mean, next door neighbor is a little strong. It's like next farm neighbor.
Right. There's still a lot of land, but their properties, I think, are adjacent to each other. And the two become close. Some say they have an affair, but others say that Lorenz actually turned down Victoria's advances because he was loyal to his wife. But at some point, Lorenz's wife dies, and Victoria and Lorenz enter into an official relationship. This is good news for Victoria because Lorenz was a wealthy farmer and something akin to the mayor of a nearby village. In other words, he's a great catch for a widowed woman in an incestuous relationship with her father. In 1918, Lorenz asked for Victoria's hand in marriage.
You know, I think it's interesting that Lorenz, I mean, he's got to know what he's getting himself into, right? Like, he's heard the stories. He's not ignorant of the rumors about Victoria and her father, but I don't know. I mean, he seems like he was in love with her because he dives in anyway.
Yeah, it seems like he has a lot to lose with reputation and the potential of, maybe he thinks that with his wealth, he won't be under the thumb of Andreas, and there's no way that Andreas can treat him as badly as he did to Carl. But whatever it was, he wanted to marry Victoria. And initially, Andreas agreed to the marriage, but when Lorenz told Andreas that a condition of the marriage would be that he'd have to stop having sex with Victoria, Brett, I think that's a pretty reasonable request. Andreas was, to say the least, displeased. Then Victoria turned out to be pregnant, and Lorenz insisted that the child was Andreas's. This led to, as you can imagine, violent arguments. And at one point, Lorenz actually fled from a sickle-wielding Andreas. A sickle is another farm tool that has a metal end.
Sharp, pointy end.
Sharp, pointy end that can do a lot of damage if you're struck with it. And needless to say, the marriage is off. And Gruber said, quote, "My daughter doesn't need a husband anymore. That's what I'm here for." And when the child, Joseph, was born, the Grubers demanded that Lorenz pay child support. Even though, remember, Andreas had said that she didn't need a husband anymore. But anyways, he demands that Lorenz pay child support, so Lorenz does what any upstanding citizen would do. He goes to the cops.
Yeah, I think Andreas thought he could have his cake and eat it too here. He's going to keep Victoria. They're going to have the baby, but he's going to make the wealthy next-door neighbor farmer pay child support. And it's like, hey, this is great, right? But Lorenz he's having none of it. He's not going to be blackmailed. So, and Andreas already has a record for incest, so Lorenz goes to the cops. The police arrest Andreas again, but this time they end up only holding him for 2 weeks. It's a little mysterious exactly what happens here, and you hear different things and you read different things about exactly what went down. But Lorenz withdraws his statements. He recants his statement that Andreas had returned to his incestuous ways, and as a result, probably of an agreement to drop paternity claims, Lorenz withdraws these statements. He pays $2,000 or 2,000 marks to Andreas. One police report says it's actually 5,000 marks, and assumes paternity over the child named Joseph. And he's then paid back the money that he paid to them in this sort of strange symbolic compromise. So he's dropping the paternity, he's dropping the incest thing, I guess he was paid. I guess he was paid by Andreas. I don't know. It's a little confusing. Money changed hands, and then it changed
money
back.
changed hands. He technically paid, I guess, to show like, oh, I assume paternity, but then he is reimbursed the money that he paid to show that he has paternity claim over Joseph. So in other words, This way, people won't say that Joseph is his father is also his grandfather.
Shopify is a platform built for growth, whether you're just starting out or already running a thriving business. From managing inventory to creating a seamless checkout experience, Shopify is designed to handle it all. And it doesn't stop there. Shopify helps you sell everywhere your customers are, online or in person. It's the ultimate tool for turning big dreams into big wins. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/OPP.
If you're looking to streamline your audio advertising buys and maximize your revenue, look no further than Triton Digital's programmatic audio advertising exchange, A2X. The private exchange consists of only licensed broadcasters and top-tier internet radio publishers, assuring the quality inventory and brand safety you can trust. Visit www.tritondigital.com to learn more.
And I kind of feel like maybe Lorenz, reading between the lines, and we don't have any record of this, but I bet you that he's still in love with Victoria. She went to him and basically begged him, don't do this to me. Don't do this to my reputation. Don't do this to the reputation of this child. Let's just make peace. So he does this. The symbolic money is paid. It's then paid back. And that's the end of it. And the two sides have made peace. Lorenz marries somebody else, and everything returns to normal, or what you would call normal in this incestuous relationship. We have incestuous normalcy, if that's
Do we know
normal.
anything about how Victoria felt about all this? I mean, was it, not that it can be consensual because it started when she was so young, but it would seem like, she continues to have this incestuous relationship with her father into adulthood. Now, of course, she doesn't have property of her own or really money of her own, so she may be stuck, but it seems like if she could have married Lorenz, she could have gotten away.
Yeah, I mean, different people tell the story different ways. Some people sort of paint Victoria in a negative light as sort of, she's having incest with her father. That's why is she doing that? That's gross or whatever. But I think you're right. I think really this was an abusive relationship from the beginning. The father has been dominating her for a long time. Even if it's somehow, quote unquote, consensual at this point, it's almost like, Stockholm syndrome or whatever. Yeah, I wouldn't really consider anything that's going on here to be normal. And I do think Victoria is trying to get away. I think this affair with Lorenz, look how it happens, right? Like, her dad goes to jail for a year for the incest. She gets a month, which I think is a pretty good indication that the authorities don't really blame her, right? Like, they sort of give her a slap on the wrist and turn her off, send her home. And she has this 11 months of freedom, and she takes advantage of it. She goes and forms this relationship with a next door neighbor and tries to get away, and it just doesn't work out. And she's just constantly trapped at Hinterkaifeck. We know that the incest continues because there's yet another maid who finds Andreas and the daughter, Victoria, having sex in the barn. The Grubers actually go through maids fairly quickly because they keep discovering things like this and either getting fired or leaving. Fast forward to March 25th, 1922. There's a lady named Sophie Fuchs and her mother. They're walking through the woods near Hinterkaifeck when they come upon Victoria, who was crying and seemingly terrified. She can't explain exactly what's wrong, only repeating that she needs to get away. It's something she says over and over again. Shortly thereafter, Victoria leaves a donation of 700 marks, which is a pretty considerable sum at the time, in the church's confessional and closes her savings account. After the murders at Hinterkaifeck, which we're going to talk about shortly, friends will recall that before this incident, Victoria was upset after seeing a man in a military-style coat watching her from the forest. When she looked at him, he disappeared back into the woods. Now, are these events connected? Or is this related to her breaking down in the forest? Is it related to her donation to the church? Is it related to her closing her savings account? It's hard to say, but things seem to speed up at this point.
Right. So 5 days later, Andreas wakes up to find a newspaper, one that's printed in Munich, that he has never subscribed to. That's just strange. I mean, I guess when you're not ordering a newspaper, why it would show up in front of your door is a strange thing, especially if you imagine that this is farmland, so it's not like someone has just misdelivered a newspaper. But that's not the only strange thing that Andreas notices. He also notices that the lock on the shed is broken. And later that day, Andreas also notices that there are footprints heading from the woods to the house, but none going back. That seems pretty foreboding. But at this point, Andreas makes no effort to figure out if someone is in his house. Seemingly just based on the footprints, someone is in his house. He just goes about his business.
And this is really weird. I mean, this is something we're going to return to several times, but the fact that all these things happened, and we know they happened based on conversations he had with other people. It's really strange that he's so nonchalant about it. You know, like he doesn't seem to freak out. He doesn't perform some sort of search of his home to figure out, you know, did somebody wander in from the woods with their Munich newspaper, break into my shed? You know, like there's no urgency seemingly to him. Right.
But it's noteworthy enough to mention to other people, you know, but not to investigate further. Let's describe this farm a little bit because it's going to come into play. You see, the farm consisted of a house and a barn with surrounding fields. The attic of the house connected to the barn. In other words, if you were in the attic, you could walk from the house to the barn without ever having to go outside or go through a door. And the farmhouse and the barn were connected by a wall with a door through it.
Which is a really weird design. And I think most people, when they talk about this case and they think about this case, don't realize that. They think of the barn and the house as separate buildings, and they are in some ways. But in a lot of ways, it's really just the same place, right? I mean, the sort of functioning part of the barn and the functioning part of the house are divided by a wall and a door. But the attic, it really is. It's just like one big roof. It covers the house, covers the barn, and you can just walk back and forth from the barn to the house if you wanted to.
I guess technically this is very user-friendly because when you live on a farm, you have to take care of your animals and, you know, if you have any livestock every single day. And the barn is probably where you have the hay, and if any of the animals are brought in, that's where they're brought into. So this way you don't have to really trudge out into the night.
Right. And if it's storming or it's snowing or whatever, or it's nighttime, like you said, it's really convenient, right? Like you don't have to worry about braving any of those elements to take care of the animals that are in your barn. So Andreas doesn't really seem to do anything about this, but he is somewhat worried about it, and he talks to his neighbor and erstwhile rival, Lorenz, later that day, and he tells him what he's seen, but he also says that he's not afraid. Now, Lorenz has a reaction that I think is more along the lines of the reaction anybody would have, but she says he should call the cops. Sounds like somebody's in your house. You should call the cops. And he also offers to lend Andreas his gun. Andreas refuses the offer, says he doesn't need a gun. Later that night, the family hears what sounds like footsteps in the attic. Now recall, like I said, you can go from the barn to the attic. Andreas, if he thinks there's somebody up there, he waits till the morning to check it out, which seems strange to me. Now, maybe he was just afraid to look into it in the dark, and he thought when the sun's up, it'll be easier. I don't know. But you kind of wonder if in that moment he wished he had taken that gun that Lorenz had offered him. Well, he goes up there in the morning, and he doesn't find anyone. But the hay that had been stacked up in the attic is now strewn across the floor and clearly walked on. And presumably that was done to muffle the sound so that they wouldn't hear as many footsteps. Andreas also realizes that he's misplaced some keys that he can't find a few days before, and he begins to wonder if whoever this is has somehow got a hold of those keys. You know, Andreas sees Lorenz again that morning, I guess, in their fields. They are neighbors. As Alice said, these two farms, they back up to each other, so they are constantly running into each other. Lorenz has some sad news. His first child with his new wife has passed away from illness. The two speak briefly about what's going on at the farm and about Lorenz's loss, and then Andreas and Victoria head up to town to buy some supplies.
That day, a new maid is starting at the farm. Like we said, the Grubers go through a lot of maids. And this maid was Maria Baumgartner. She was 44 years old and disabled with a damaged foot, who one suspects that Andreas is hoping will just not be so nosy. Now, Maria doesn't want the job, but she's limited in her choices because of her disability. And as her sister, who had accompanied her to the farm, said, when her sister was getting ready to leave, Maria actually ran after her and hugged her in tears because this is not the job she wanted. And sadly, this was the last time the two would see each other.
Really bad timing for Miss Baumgartner. You gotta feel bad for this lady.
She really just shows up at the wrong time. And on April 1st, young Kazilia doesn't go to school. Now, this is when there begin to be signs. People begin to notice that something is just off. That day, a couple delivery men drop off some coffee, but they see no one working on the farm and no one answers the door. And that's strange because this is a working farm. So their next stop is at Lorenz's house. And when the coffee men stop there and express their concerns to Anna, Lorenz's wife, Anna tells them that Lorenz isn't there. Now, this is probably too bad because Lorenz was the last person that Andreas had spoken to, so he may have put two and two together if he had been there, but he's not there. Now, that night, a carpenter is walking by the farm when he sees a man in the yard. Smoke is rising from the chimney and the animals are all quiet. Now, this indicates that they've actually been cared for. Otherwise, they'd be loud and probably crying out if they're hungry or thirsty or generally not cared for. This carpenter notices an acrid odor from the smoke, and he would have investigated had the man in the yard not shined a light into his eyes. This made the carpenter uneasy, and rather than continue in his investigation, he hurries down the road and minds his own business. The next day is Sunday, and the family is missing from church. This is really unusual because Victoria is known for her voice and she sings in the church choir every Sunday. So it's not normal for the family to miss church. The next day, on Monday, the mailman swings by and he doesn't see anyone. He does notice, though, that the kitchen door is ajar. And that's the only person who comes by that day. The next day, on Tuesday, a mechanic, Albert Hoffner, shows up to fix a diesel engine. But when he shows up, he can't find Andreas. And he waits there for some time, but finally he just decides to start the job. And so he's working on the diesel engine. He sees a man at a distance, and he can hear a dog barking inside the barn. But the door is closed, and he can't see the dog. The man spends about a little over 4 hours working on the diesel engine, and when he finishes, he walks outside to see the barn door now open. The dog is tied up outside, snarling at him and barking, and the dog has a big gash on its head. At this point, the mechanic makes his way to Lorenz's house to tell him what he's seen. But again, Lorenz is not home. He's out. The mechanic lets the Schlittenbauers know he's going to see if he can get help from other farms, and he leaves to spread the word because what he's seen has really concerned him at this point.
So Lorenz finally comes home. Wherever he was, he finally comes home, and he hears this. He hears this story from his wife, Anna, and from his children. So he decides, and this is kind of weird to me, that rather than go check it out himself, he sends his 16-year-old son and his 9-year-old stepson to the farm, to the Andreas Gruber farm. to see if they can find out what's going on. So the boys, they go over there. They don't really see anything. And they return to their father with news that the farm is locked up tight and no one's about. This is also weird. I mean, once again, if you go by your neighbor's house and there's nobody there today, maybe it's not that big a deal. But in the 1920s, on a farm in the middle of nowhere, people don't just go off. There's always somebody there. There's always somebody who has to, if nothing else, take care of the animals. So Lorenz hears this and he realizes something has to be wrong. He goes and he rustles up some neighbors, Michael Pohl and Joseph Sigel. And he tells them what he's heard, and he suggests that he believes Andreas may have hanged himself. Why this is what he thinks, I don't know.
And this is strange, too, because that would just be Andreas. You would still see other people. There's a whole family that lives there, not just Andreas.
Exactly. And maybe thinking that very thing, he says something on the way to the farm that kind of goes along with that. He says, quote, "Nothing moves here anymore. Either they all hung themselves or were killed." Which, once again, I mean, I don't know how violent a place Hinterkaifeck is, but it's a little weird to me that his initial thought is everybody's killed. Now, maybe he's thinking back to what Andreas told him. Maybe he's thinking about the strange things that have been happening. And like you said earlier, he's sort of putting two and two together. When the men arrive, they break through a gate to enter the barn because everything's broken. And when they enter the barn, their flashlights that they're carrying illuminate a massacre. There are 4 bodies, partially covered in hay and debris, with horrific wounds. The 2 farmers who are with him do what you would expect. They scream and they run back into the night. But not Lorenz. He advances on the bodies, grabbing one and flipping it over to reveal that it's Andrea. He then moves the bodies one by one, pulling them out of the hay by their feet. Now here's how the police report. I know I don't know what Lorenz is doing right now, but here's how the police report will describe this scene. Police are gonna arrive. Even back in 1922, there were police. All 4 corpses had severe skull injuries and were lying in pools of blood. Andreas Gruber was only dressed in trousers and a shirt. The young girl only wore a nightshirt. The 2 women were still wearing their working day clothes. So that tells you who we've got here. We have Andreas Gruber. We have Kazilia the younger. We have Kazilia the older. And we have Victoria. So that's 4 people. There are 2 people left. There's Joseph, the young child, and the maid, Baumgartner. From the threshing floor, an unlocked door led us into the stable corridor. There were significant blood spatters on this door. From the last mentioned forecourt, we got into the kitchen. There were individual blood stains visible on the stone pavement, but no footprints. From the kitchen in the same direction, we came to a chamber. There was a woman with a severe skull injury in a large pool of clotted blood. To the right of the corpse is a bed. As the findings showed, the dead woman is the unmarried maid, Maria Baumgartner. The dead woman was still fully clothed. She still had her leather shoes on her feet. From the kitchen, a door led into the entrance hall to the east. There was also a blood stain on the floor. To the left of the doorway, a door led into the bedroom. There were 3 boxes, 2 beds, standing side by side, a cot, and a pram. In the little cart was the 2.5-year-old son, Joseph, of the widow Victoria Gabriel, with a shattered skull.
That's so sad.
I know, it really is tragic, particularly
the little boy in his pram.
I mean, it's all tragic. So the report continues by describing all of the property that was left behind before making this stunning statement. Paper money should have fallen into the hands of the perpetrator in considerable amounts. Among other things, the assumption was made that the murdered might have possessed up to 100,000 marks. They planned to build a stable. So, a couple things about this. Number one, this report, I don't know, you've probably never heard this report before. It's only available on a German website, but the miracle of Google Translate allowed us to translate these reports. So, How accurate that is, I'm sure there's some stuff lost in translation, lost in automatic machine translation there, but that's what one of the reports said. We're going to put links to those reports up on the website so you guys can check it out and read it yourself. There's a lot of sort of the original documents that you probably haven't seen before that are available in German.
Right. So the police then proposed the following sequence of events the night of the murder. It says, Andreas Gruber was only dressed in underpants and a shirt, and the younger Gruber only in a shirt. Both are likely to have been in bed beforehand or have made arrangements to go to bed. As the interrogated witness, Schlittenbauer, Pohl, and Siegel state, a cow had been untied when they arrived in the stable. Perhaps because of the unrest that arose in the stable, one of the murdered people, and perhaps Victoria Gabriel, went into the stable, were struck down there, thrown onto the threshing floor. One by one, the other people must have gradually followed to look into the stable. Gruber or the little girl should have been the last, since the little girl was in the threshing floor closest to the stable door. The maid, Maria Baumgartner, must have been surprised in her room. Now, why the murderer also killed the 2-year-old boy cannot be explained. With this boy, no danger should have been feared. It would have to be that the murderer was a person known to the child by name, or else the child made a noise. The child may have been put away out of the family interests, inheritance. That's what the report says. One thing about the 2-year-old boy, I don't know if it's necessarily that the boy knew this person by name. I would think that clearly this person wanted to cover up the crime and also stuck around for a few days seemingly. And if you have a 2-year-old boy, that boy needs to be taken care of, or he'll cry, or he'll make noise, or just draw attention to the property. So I think maybe the 2-year-old boy knew the murderer, but also just he seemed to be there to off them all, and that did not exempt the 2-year-old boy.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting theory the police are putting out here, and it's a theory that some other people have tried to run with. There were people who wanted this property, and we'll talk about that a little later on. There's a couple things that are interesting about this. I mean, number one, so we got this cow that's wandering around the stable. It's kind of weird that the cow is still wandering around because, as you said, it seems like somebody stuck around for a while. It seems like that person took care of the animals. At one point, the barn door had been open. We know that. So why is the cow running free at this point? I don't really know why that is, and I don't know that it's necessarily connected to what happened that night. Now, it's a good theory, right? You can sort of imagine, number one, the family's getting ready to go to bed. The maid has just gotten there. There hasn't been a maid in a while. So you could imagine she's actually kind of working late to catch up a little bit. So I think that's probably why she's still in her clothes, is because she's still working. So she's working. Everybody else is getting ready to go to bed. And then you hear this commotion in the barn. Oh no, a cow's gotten loose. It could hurt itself. It could hurt one of the other animals, whatever. It could kick over a flame, burn the whole place down or whatnot. And so it seems like the police imagine that Andreas, being the gentleman that he is, sent Victoria to go take care of the cow, right? He's like, I'm getting ready to go to bed. Go take care of the cow. And so Victoria goes in there, gets killed. Cow's still making noise. There's still a lot of mooing, stomping around. And so eventually Andreas sends his wife, go take care of the cow. She goes in there. She gets killed. Finally, Andreas is like, okay, fine, I'll take care of the cow. He goes in, gets killed. Little Kazilia, maybe she just wonders where all the adults have gone, and she follows in, and she gets killed as well. And that's the point where the murderer comes in. Now, I've got to think, even if he knew about the family, like imagine he had been there for a couple days scoping things out, he probably didn't know about the maid, right? So he thinks he's going in there, he's going to kill that kid, and he's going to be done. And he probably did just stumble upon this woman and had to kind of kill her just because she was there, and he didn't even realize she'd be there. Because I don't think he would have.
And that makes sense because he would have waited, I think, for her to come to the barn like everyone else came.
Exactly.
Right?
He clearly waited so that anybody who could do anything to him fell into his trap, and he took him out. And that's when he enters the house. So, yeah, I think he stumbled upon her and, killed her because of that.
The report continues. Despite having to break down a gate, it's later reported that Lorenz has a key to the house he uses to open the door. A police report from a 1931 investigation seems to question this. It says, quote, in particular, the most important information from Blay, a witness, which would primarily represent a burden for the Schlittenbauer, are obviously incorrect, especially the claim that Schlittenbauer had a key to the house with which he was the first to enter the house. Already during the first surveys and interviews, it was established with clarity, excluding any doubt, that Schlittenbauer first penetrated the house with farmers Pohl and Sigel on the way through the machine house and the barn, and that he only then opened the front door from the inside. However, the files do not contain a statement as to whether this door was locked on the inside with a bolt or a key, and whether this key was in the door.
And this is something people have pointed to. Schlittenbauer, Lorenz obviously comes under a lot of suspicion very soon. I mean, you've already sort of seen why. You know, there's a lot of reasons to suspect him. One of the things people say is they break through the gate, they go into the barn, and then all of a sudden, Lorenz has a key that he uses to open the farmhouse. And that's the sign. He's the one who stole the keys before. That's why he had the key. He's the murderer. And this report seems to undermine that completely and seems to say, based on the earliest interviews, that he did not have a key and that either they were able to unlock the door from the inside, sort of going around and unbolting it, or the key was actually in the keyhole. So I don't think that 100% disproves whether he has a key or not, but in the years after this, there were a lot of rumors that kind of spread about him. And in a case like this, with so much rumor and so much innuendo and so much legend that's grown up around it, I think when you can return to these very early reports like this, it can be really valuable. And that's what the police are doing in 1931 when they're doing, you know, it's not 2020, but it's still 9 years later, and they're doing sort of a new investigation, an early cold case investigation, if you will. And what are they doing? They're doing the same thing that we do. They're trying to return to those original sources and see if they can ferret out any inconsistencies or close off any rumors that they had heard before. Whatever the case, however they got in there, whether they had a key, whether they slipped the bolt, whatever, Lorenz, he leads his crew into the house. They go off to find help. He actually stays in the house with the bodies. And a crowd gathers, and Lorenz does something else that people point to for all eternity as proof that he is guilty here. He starts to lead tours through the death house. And he's like showing people the bodies and showing people the maid and showing where the child was killed. And you got to remember, there's at least a 50-50 chance that that's his son lying dead in that pram. So not only is he friends with these people, they may very well be his blood relatives. And he continues to do that until an inspector finally shows up and locks up the house and is like, what are you doing? Stop doing that. Even in 1922, people understood that you're ruining our crime scene. You've already moved the bodies around. And now you're like leading people through a tour. Let's not do that. The bodies are autopsied in a bizarre and creepy twist in a case that's already pretty creepy. They remove their heads and send them to Munich for further study. And then the bodies are buried without the heads. The intention apparently had been to return the heads at some point, but the general understanding is that when Munich was bombed in World War II, the heads were lost. So the heads are gone. We don't know where the heads are.
Why do you have to remove the heads to study them? Why can't they be attached to the bodies?
It's the 20s. I think it was just easier to send the heads. And I think the heads were where most of the damage was. You know, this person, they followed my advice, essentially, you know. They were good axe murderers, and they went for the head, and they did most of the damage in the head. So I think they thought, we don't really have to ship the whole bodies. Just cut the heads off, send it to the fancy experts over in Munich, and they'll be able to tell us things based on the heads. So I think that's what they were doing. I don't know. It's creepy. The whole thing's creepy.
It's very creepy.
I mean, you could just imagine, like, headless ghosts of Hinterkaifeck wandering around. Where's my head? Right? Kind of like the Headless Horseman, who was Hessian. He was German, so everything ties together. Nearly a year later, the farm is torn down and hidden carefully in the attic, where you would expect it to be found, based on what we've already told you, is the mattock, still stained with blood, along with a rusted pocket knife that is discovered in the barn.
Strange that the person wouldn't just take those away or bury them. You would expect that there'd be a search of the house at some point and that you could find the murder weapons. I would have buried them or something.
You got to wonder, does this say something about the killer and who the killer is? When we start thinking about the psychology of possible suspects here and what would you do? I think it's interesting that he hid the mattock at all. I mean, imagine, for instance, that this is a transient. This is just somebody who stopped by, murdered some people, hung out for a couple days, and then headed on out of town, right? Why even hide the weapon? Why not just leave it with the bodies? They're going to find the bodies. They're going to know the body. They're going to know they're dead, and they're going to know how they were killed, So why even go to the trouble of hiding the weapon? I guess I can imagine not taking it with you just because you don't want to be discovered with a murder weapon. But to me, the fact that you hid the weapon, I think says something about who may or may not have been responsible. That maybe it was somebody who was close by. If you think it was Lorenz, for instance, you're trying to hide things, you're trying to delay discovery for as long as possible.
Or it's a noticeable, if you are someone known to the community, they may know your mattock, right?
Could be. I think this was the family's mattock.
Oh.
I think they used, which is also interesting. You go to somebody's house to murder 5 people, you end up murdering 6, and you don't take a weapon with you. Did you just decide, whatever I find is what I'm going to use? If I'd found the sickle, it would have been a sickle murder instead of an axe murder. But you found the mattock, and so that's what you went with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize it was the family's.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the family's mattock.
That makes it very bizarre.
Yeah, so why hide it? I mean, I don't know. The psychology of that is strange to me. I don't know exactly what to draw from the fact that whoever did this thought, I'm going to use a weapon I find there. And once again, okay, there's a couple things that could be going on here, right? Number one, it's a farm in the 20s. You don't have to know the family to know there's going to be various farm implements at the farm that I could use to kill somebody, right? Like, it's not like breaking into a house today and not knowing whether or not there's going to be a gun hidden under the bed, right? Like,
Right.
There's going to be something there. So it doesn't necessarily mean it was somebody who knew the family, but on the other hand, if you actually were going somewhere to kill someone, even if you were pretty sure what I just said is true, would you rely on that? Would you just depend on the fact that you will be able to find the weapon before someone finds you and that you'll then be able to use it? Or would this be somebody who knew the family, who knew where they kept their mattock, and knew if I go into the barn, the mattock will be leaning against the wall or whatever, and then when they come in, I'll take them out, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also interesting that this person was confident enough that the family would, despite everything else that's happened, would not be defensive, right? Like, would not think, we've been hearing all these noises in the attic. Maybe when I go into the barn to see the cow, I should carry a gun with me, for instance. Or let's all go in together. They essentially went in there. They did exactly what they needed to do for his plan to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. They went one at a time. It was the women first even, right? And
yeah.
It's almost like he had to have watched them for a while and known the dynamics of the family, maybe even known that they wouldn't have called the cops if they thought someone had snuck into their house because of their previous interactions with the police, right? You're usually not going to invite people into your house if they're still being suspected of illegal activity. incest in
Right.
this case, right? And so maybe they knew that even if they suspected someone was walking around in their attic, they may investigate themselves, but they're not going to involve the cops.
Right. And we're going to talk about this more tomorrow, and we're going to keep diving into this. We're going to look at the timeline a little more closely, some of the other things the police did, some of the suspects, but I do think it's worth remembering the things that we're talking about now, that just based on these few things, it seems like this is a person who knew the family, knew their habits, knew the dynamic, like Alice said, and felt confident that they wouldn't be armed, they wouldn't all come in as a group, they wouldn't call the police, and the Matic would be there when they needed it. That's sort of what I'm seeing just as we initially start off on this case.
Yeah. People will have to stick around to find out what happens.
Yeah, another a cliffhanger. Gotta come back tomorrow if you want to find out what happened in this 100-year-old mystery. I know we're just getting started, but if you guys have thoughts, questions, corrections, if anybody reads German and they want to tell us that all those translations were completely wrong, you know where to find us. Shoot us an email at prosecutorspod@gmail.com, at prosecutorspod for Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're also around on Reddit and YouTube. Shout out to everybody watching us on YouTube. And thanks to everybody who's been leaving Apple reviews. We're over 400 reviews at this point, and you guys have left just some awesome reviews. And we do read them, and they mean a lot because, podcasting can be a lonely game. Sometimes you need that encouragement. Right, Alice?
I'm never lonely with you around, Brett.
Oh, well, thank you. But don't let her statements of encouragement make you think we don't need more encouragement. So if you have not yet left a review on Apple, hope you guys will swing by and do that. We also have a Patreon page. If you want to take advantage of that, you can. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine with us as well. Like
I can't believe that people are giving on Patreon. It is just amazing. Thank you, guys.
It's insane. And we really appreciate it. And I just want to reiterate, both to people who don't give and people who do, you do not have to pay money to listen to this show. So we're going to keep doing it either way, but we really appreciate it, and it does help a lot. I'm trying to get Alice to buy a new computer, so we need all the Patreon help we can get. But I think that's all we've got for today. Alice, do you have anything else?
Nothing else today. Excited to see what happens in the next part of this installment.
And we hope that all of you will join us for that. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. It's crazy. We're over 400 reviews on Apple.
I know. And people keep telling us to quit our jobs, which is interesting because I feel like that's what sets us apart, our jobs.
Yeah, that's true. That would make it make us less interesting. But we could quit our jobs and not tell anybody. How about that?
Well, yeah, but but we're all about being truthful, so we'd have to be like the stay-at-homers.
Can we be freelance prosecutors?
Ooh. I'm pretty sure it doesn't work that way, but
The vigilante.
The vigilante. Find us on your neighborhood watch. Maybe we can get Patreons for people to buy us Segways.
Segways and stun guns.
Stun guns. Oh my goodness. I'd be terrible. I'd definitely stun myself instead. There's a reason I'm a prosecutor and not an actual police.
Not a police officer.
Yeah, I'd be terrible.